Russian President Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, is set to meet with his Turkish counterpart in the Black Sea resort city of Sochi on Friday. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, fresh from the diplomatic triumph of securing that resumption of grain shipments from blocked Ukrainian ports. On the agenda for Putin and Erdogan, of course, is the war in Ukraine, but also what Turkey calls its security concerns over Kurdish militants in northern Syria, where Russia remains opposed to any Turkish intervention. For more on the story, we can cross to Stephen Cook. He's a senior fellow for Middle East Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Stephen, thanks so much for being with us. NATO, of course, very strongly condemned the invasion of Ukraine. Turkey is a NATO member, but it's also been very careful to claim a middle ground in the conflict. How has it managed to walk that line, and is it paying off diplomatically, in your view?
Well, it's certainly paying off diplomatically in terms of Turkey's relations with Russia. It has not paid off, however, for Ankara's ties in Washington, D.C. But I think the Turks are most concerned about their security concerns in northern Syria and planning a military operation there in order to ensure that Kurds make fewer gains towards their ultimate goal of setting up some sort of autonomous or independent state in Syria. That is a problem for the United States, as has been Turkey's position with regard to Russia.
Well, you say that this Turkish middle line has paid off with Moscow. There must be significant tensions between the two sides. They found themselves backing opposite sides of a couple different conflicts now recently. I'm thinking of arms sales to Ukraine like the Bayraktar, as well as Azerbaijan and Armenia. How are they managing to keep this working relationship?
Yes, it's a fascinating situation in which Turkey and Russia find themselves on opposite ends of major conflicts, Syria, Ukraine, Libya, as you mentioned, Nagorno-Karabakh. But they have had a meeting of the minds on one very important issue, is that neither the Turkish nor Russian leadership feel very comfortable with an American-led global or regional order. And thus they've been able to cooperate. Turkey very much wants to pursue a policy independent of the United States and its NATO allies, and that requires it to continue to have correct relations with Russia, despite their vast differences on a number of other regional conflicts.
What do you think this means for the future of Western, let's say, diplomatic hegemony or the NATO alliance? Erdogan obviously using this opportunity to claim stake a claim as a growing power. Is that going to sort of shift the balance away from the traditional Atlantic side of NATO?
Well, it's certainly the case that the Turks want to remain in NATO, but at the same time pursue a policy that is independent of NATO, that from their perspective is more in line with Turkey as a major power. And that's why you have them walking, as you point out, a fine line between Ukraine and Russia, wanting to maintain its ties with Russia, while at the same time being very open and supportive of Ukraine's territorial integrity. This is part of Turkey's effort to ensure that its influence grows not just in Europe, but around the world.
If I could bring it back for a second to northern Syria and these Kurdish militias. Now, obviously, Moscow has been fairly vocally opposed to any Turkish military intervention there. But today we hear the Kremlin talking about Ankara's legitimate security concerns in the region. Do you think it's likely that Russia is going to bend on this issue, or what's likely to come next?
Well, it's important to note that those comments come at the same time that the Russians have tabled a proposal to the Turks that would help the Turks get around international sanctions by buying into Turkish oil and gas companies and allowing corresponding bank accounts in Turkish state banks. So the Russians are clearly on a charm offensive with the Turks, and it may in fact be that Vladimir Putin gives the green light to the Turkish government to undertake a military incursion as a way of sort of sweetening the deal and encouraging the Turks to help Russia around international sanctions. This is not unprecedented. The Turks spent a lot of time helping the Iranians get around international sanctions over the course of the last 20 years.
Now, is Washington in a pickle with this situation? Because these Kurdish militias are some of the main forces that helped Washington to defeat the Islamic State group in northern Syria. There's a long history of these temporary alliances between Washington and Kurdish military groups that seem to always end badly for the Kurds. Is this another situation where we're going to see that?
It is another situation where we're going to see that. It's one of these kind of contradictions and problems in U.S. foreign policy that it is supporting a group that has been staunch supporters and allies in the fight against the Islamic State that its NATO ally Turkey considers to be a terrorist organization. In the end, when forced with a choice between Turkey and the Kurdish fighting force called the People's Protection Units, the United States is likely going to choose Turkey. But at the moment, the Turks are making it difficult for the United States to choose Turkey by its relations with Russia, by this proposal that, you never know what the Turks are going to do. They do need money. Turkey is in a bad financial situation. This proposal that the Russians have for cooperation on a variety of economic fronts.
All right, Stephen Cook, Senior Fellow, Middle East Studies at the Council of Foreign Relations. Thanks so much for being with us and for that analysis.
My pleasure.